Welcome to the Wanderer's History Podcast. Today we'll talk about John Hunyadi, or Ioan de Hunedoara in Romanian, voivode of Transylvania, defender of Hungarian borders against the Ottomans, and all in all, very important figure of the 15th century early modern Eastern Europe. After in the previous episodes, we talked about Stefan the Great of Moldova. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you to please hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, to make sure you never miss any new material from this podcast. John Hunyadi was born between 1405 and 1407, part of the very powerful Hungarian noble family of the Hunyadis. King Matthias Corvinus, his son, would be part of it. John's father was Voic or Voicu, and he had founded the family, and the name had derived in what is today the Hunedoara County in central Romania, known for its beautiful medieval castles. 16th century scholar Antun Vrancic wrote that John Hunyadi had been a native of the Hatzeg region. His father had been a notable commander against the Ottomans, and as a reward, Sigismund of Luxembourg granted him the Hunedoara estate. From a very young age, John Hunyadi showed remarkable political instincts by backing Vladislav III Jagellon, who eventually became King of Hungary after an unexpected death of Albert II of Habsburg. In 1441, he was rewarded with the voivodeship of Transylvania, establishing a strong anti-Ottoman tradition in Transylvania. At the Battle of Sibiu, also known as Hermannstadt, in 1442, Hungarian forces led by Hunyadi crushed the Ottoman forces of Mezid. In September of the same year, at Yalomica, he delivered another strong win for Hungary against the Ottomans. He was known for hiring mercenaries and making great use of them, among them being Hussite Czech troops that professionalized the army. These victories against the Ottoman Empire put John Hunyadi at the forefront of what would be a series of fights against them known as the Long Campaign. Mainly Vladislav Jagellon would appear as the leader, but Hunyadi would command the armies, recruiting tens of thousands of soldiers. In 1443, at Niš, Hunyadi, along with a few thousand Serbian troops, defeated the Ottomans. However, in December of 1443, at the Battle of Zlatica, ends with a moderate Ottoman success, which halted the momentum of Hunyadi's forces. Despite reluctance on both sides, on August 15, 1444, the Peace of Szeged was signed. This would be short-lived, however, because in November 1444, a large coalition was formed in Transylvania with Moldovan, Wallachian, Hungarian, Polish, Croat, and Bohemian, along with Bulgarian rebels, aided by papal finances, which eventually faced the army of Murad II, which had over 60,000 troops. Of course, we are talking about the Great Crusade of Varna in 1444, where papal, Venetian, and Genoese fleets helped blockade the Ottoman routes. At Varna, Hunyadi suffered a heavy defeat, with the situation made a lot worse by the death of Hungarian King Vladislav III Jagellon, after the very young king launched a premature attack against the Ottoman janissaries. In vain, Hunyadi tried to retrieve the body of the fallen king, but could only retreat after suffering even more heavy losses. Varna would be a disaster for Hungary and a key moment for the Ottomans' plans in Rumelia, the continental bit of the future Ottoman Empire. After Varna, Hunyadi would actually be imprisoned very briefly in Wallachia, with Vlad Dracul, being Vlad the Impaler's father, eventually releasing him. Hunyadi had to stabilize the Hungarian crown, now passed on to a 4-year-old Ladislaus. As a result, Hunyadi became, very temporarily, regent of Hungary. In 1445, he planned another crusade, but we will also see him interfere in the inner politics of Wallachia, aiming to potentially annex Wallachia to Transylvania and Hungary. At the Second Battle of Kosovo between the 17th and 20th of October 1448, Hungary and Hunyadi wanted to avenge the loss at Varna. He had support from Poland, Wallachia, and Moldova, and a sizable force with reports of having between 40 and 50,000 troops. Murad II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, personally led an army between 40 and 60,000 troops. However, he had many regiments of sipahis, extremely versatile cavalry units, also consistent numbers of janissaries. The sipahis were disposed in such a way that they cut communication lines between Hunyadi and the Allies, causing immediate and severe damage, disruption, and forcing the troops to retreat after the 19th of October. It was a decisive defeat. Hungary could no longer muster the resources to fight such a remarkable Ottoman army, one which would conquer Constantinople in 1453, with Murad's son Mehmed II achieving the century-defining feat of European history. All in all, in 1448, at Kosovo Polje, or the Second Battle of Kosovo, Hunyadi suffers another heavy defeat against the Ottomans. Interesting aspect of the battle being that heavy cavalry would not be efficient against the Ottoman janissaries and infantry, something that would be reconfirmed at the Hungarian defeat at Mohacs in 1526. After the defeat at Kosovo, we would see John Hunyadi intervene in Moldova, installing Bogdan II, Stefan the Great's father, as voivode in Moldova. And in 1448, Pope Nicholas II had made Hunyadi Atleti Christi, a title given to a few rulers for their anti-Ottoman efforts and crusades, such as Louis I of Hungary, Stefan the Great of Moldova, and Skanderberg of Albania. By 1453, we would see John Hunyadi committed to truces and reconciliations, residing mostly in Transylvania. War would return against the Ottomans, who broke the truce and attempted to conquer Kruševac, which was in fact a precursor to the attempt in 1456 to conquer Belgrade. Hunyadi helped Vlad the Impaler regain his throne in Wallachia. He managed to muster an army and garrisoned it in Belgrade before July 1456. The Ottomans had experienced momentous success at Constantinople only 3 years earlier, and their advance in the Balkan and Central European regions were deemed unstoppable. The siege lasted between the 4th of July and the 22nd. The Ottoman troops were forced to retreat to Constantinople. Hunyadi delivered an impressive victory, keeping Belgrade in Hungarian control until 1521. However, the Hungarian victory at Belgrade in 1456 came with a heavy price, given the season and the severe outbreak of disease in Belgrade. Plague broke out in the camp, from which John Hunyadi himself died 3 weeks later, on August 11th, 1456. He would be buried at the Catholic Cathedral in Alba Iulia in Transylvania. It is argued that this win at Belgrade halted Ottoman advances in Hungary, postponing them until the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent in the next century, who would not only just conquer Belgrade in 1521, but decimate the Hungarians at Mohacs in 1526. In his historical primary source, entitled Europe, looking at the history of Europe between 1400 and 1458, Pope Pius II wrote, quote, "He, Hunyadi, governed the country with an iron rod, as they say, and while the king was away, he was regarded as his equal. After routing the Turks at Belgrade, he survived for a brief time before dying of disease. When he was ill, they say that he forbade that the body of our Lord to be brought to him, declaring that it was unworthy for a king to enter the house of a servant. Although his strength was failing, he ordered himself to be carried out to church, where he made his confession in Christian way, received the divine Eucharist, and surrendered his soul to God in the arms of the priests. Fortunate soul to have arrived in heaven as both herald and author of the heroic action at Belgrade. John Hunyadi would leave a remarkable legacy along with a notable successor in Matthias Corvinus, who would become King of Hungary. Interestingly, Hunyadi is deemed a national hero both in Hungary but also in Romania, given that Transylvania briefly in 1600 and then permanently in 1918 became part of what is now Romania. All in all, a remarkable leader and commander of the 15th century in Hungary, Transylvania, and southeastern Europe. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wanderer's History podcast about John Hunyadi. If you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss any new material, and check out the other episodes as well. Until the next time, all the best.